I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember the TV show What's My Line, where people would come on and they wouldn't actually tell you what they did for a living. You had to ask all these questions, who they were, to figure out what job they were in. So I want you to guess. There are two people up here that work for dull, boring financial services companies. And one person works for a cool footwear device company, whatever, all the things, I don't know all the things they even do, but footwear things and stuff. So
you really want these shoes, don't you?
So if you can't see them in the back, you make sure you're a point of doing that. But maybe let me start out by actually giving them real introductions here, because we really do have two, not just senior executives in their firms, but leaders in this area that are making change. As Anne highlighted, the title of this is Business Solutions. So we want to really give structure and grounding to what this roadmap means for all that we can do and learn from them and our own businesses. And we have two companies here, Wells Fargo and Nike, that in many ways couldn't be more different in the nature of their businesses and their personas and how they interact with their consumers, but at the same time, they're on the same path. And I think that's where we can appreciate that, how across all industry sectors, how we can approach sustainability. So formally introducing Patricia Callahan, and again, the bios are in the book, but I just wanted to highlight, because I'm amazed at your own personal portfolio. I'm surprised you even could slip over here to talk to us, because she's managing corporate communications, corporate social responsibility, enterprise marketing, government relations, and the toughest of all we appreciate here, human resources. And you oversee the company's brand, communications, reputation management, stakeholder engagement, people development efforts in an average workday. Perfect.
A great team.
And Hannah Jones has been with us a number of times for a series of conferences since Nike has been such an innovator in our area. And she is Vice President of Sustainable Business and Innovation and leads an entire team that's mandated for enabling the company to thrive in a sustainable economy. We'll hear a lot more about that in a minute. So time-wise, it's a quarter of, we're just about on time. We were going to go to 10:30 and allow for about 15 minutes of questions. So about 30 minutes of conversation. And again, since you've got two such deep, robust speakers here with knowledge about what we're doing, hopefully you'll be thinking about some things to ask them. Maybe just to go back to what Anne led off with today around the series roadmap and just how important this is. It's documents like this, as well as the investor roadmap, that really give structure to our conversation. And when this first came out in 2010, this was purposely visionary, audacious, setting a vision for us of what businesses could be doing. Not knowing until we started measuring, where we would go with this and what was the state of sustainability efforts in the corporate world. And like CalPERS, CalSTRS uses this document in its engagement. And a number of you know Brian Rice that's here that leads our sustainability efforts and our corporate governance staff. But it's a very valuable document, because really when we walk in the door with companies we invest in, they want to know, well, what is it you expect us to be doing? What is your perspectives on this? And this document really gives that very specific effort structure for businesses to understand what our perspectives are. I want to highlight a couple of the numbers that are in the reports over time. Several were mentioned yesterday, but again, as we start our conversation, I think they give some grounding to where there is progress and where there isn't. We can talk about why there isn't. So in that original report, it indicated that 85% of companies studied do not link any type of ESG or sustainability performance to executive compensation. Now, executive compensation is just one of many indicators that's discussed in this report. But when you work in corporate governance areas for a long time, you get to realize that that particular indicator is very valuable, because it's one of the toughest always when engaging in companies to make progress on. I guess I'd see it as a lagging indicator. It's one of the last things that really often that you can make progress on. So we want to watch that statistic, I think, in these successive reports to see where progress has been made. Again, in that original study, 51% do not publish sustainability reports, and only 28% had instituted board oversight on sustainability issues. So following that 2010 report, we had a 2012 follow-up, which we discussed at the annual meeting, and that was our first baseline assessment, evaluating how 600 of the largest publicly traded companies were integrating sustainability into their business systems. And now yesterday we released the next update, the second assessment. So again, we're seeing incremental progress on almost all the indicators, but certainly not at the speed or scale of innovation compared to the problems that we're all trying to solve. So we're also seeing many examples where companies have established strong accountability mechanisms and where they are in fact leading the pack in certain improvement areas. So one area that there was change in is this area of executive compensation, where now 24%, up from 15%, have indicated that they're linking executive compensation in some way to sustainability performance. So that's positive, considering how difficult it is to make progress in an area like executive comp. But having said that, the deeper statistic that's in the report indicates that only 3% of companies actually link executive comp to voluntary sustainability targets, such as greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So that's clearly a signal that we have to keep watching on where businesses are able to make changes. So let's get started with our conversation today. As I said, we've got two very strong leaders in this area that we can converse with. We want to talk about business solutions, what they've done, but also where they see changes leading to 2020, where their plans are, where their companies have strategies going forward. And not to put extra pressure on you, but I did check last night, just kind of seeing what our investments were in these two companies, just seeing what was my personal commitment here to this conversation. And for Wells Fargo, actually, it's pretty sizable, I just want to tell you.
That's very good.
It's a good thing.
A very good investment on your part.
No pressure.
But I do want to tell you the number. It's $587 million, actually, for us. So
thank you.
And even though I love one of those pair of shoes, our investment is $136 million in Nike. And again, I say that to you all because for both of these companies, they have very large institutional investor investments going on there. For us, for CalPERS, for the other major public pension funds here, a significant part of our portfolio is invested in index money. And both of these companies, of course, are prominent companies in the major indexes, so we would, by definition, have prominent investments with them. But having said that, that is the very reasons why we are also engaged in these conversations with these companies, because we know we're going to be with Wells and we're going to be with Nike from now in perpetuity. And we need these companies to be successful to protect that $500+ million, that $100+ million in what we do. And that's really what creates the energy, the involvement of institutional investors in this conversation. All right. So having said that,
Yeah.
Hannah, your company obviously is because you're a for-profit company, you're not a charitable organization. Your success is based upon growing and growing and growing and selling more things and shoes and wearing wearable devices and all those things. So like any company we want to invest in, we're obviously looking for growth and profitability. But at the same time, by the nature of the things that you make and do, you're based on natural resource, and the scarcity of natural resources impacts you. So you're front and center in dealing with that friction point between scarcity and the need to grow and sell and sales for a company. So talk about how does the company really think through that so that you can actually accomplish two goals which would seem to be in a long-term trajectory that would not work?
Creative tension is a great thing, right? About 6-7 years ago, we ran a very extensive scenario planning exercise in which we looked at the meta trends, and we looked at this very issue of rising populations, rising consumption, and increasing scarcity and volatility around natural resources. And then we added into that the kind of the macro trends of the impact of climate change on supply chains, consumers and markets, economies. We added into that also increasing transparency and the potential that new technologies could play, both in terms of transparency, but actually also in terms of how they might turn the world upside down from a manufacturing and a making perspective and from consumer perspectives. Where we got to was a corporate strategy, which is part of our overarching strategy as a company, which is that we are looking at how we can really enable growth by decoupling from scarce resources. What that means for us is a laser focus on, number one, materials and products. If you look at materials, it makes up about 60% of our environmental footprint. So if you said to me, you can only change one thing in what you do, it would be materials. So we obsess, how can we move to a sustainable palette of materials? How can we start to bring products to the market which radically redefine those products and what they're made of? The second area is around manufacturing. Again, a major part of our carbon footprint today is in, I think I'm going in and out, is in the footwear manufacturing specifically. And yet we don't own any of that supply chain. It's a completely fragmented supply chain and part of a much bigger system. So it's all about how do we radically redefine that supply chain. And the third side of this is how do we actually, as a product company, start to move into services? How do we dematerialize our revenue stream so that we have a balanced portfolio? And all of that adds up to ultimately this North Star of how do we move into closed-loop products and business models and really begin to thrive in a future state economy that we think will need to become a circular economy.
As you strategize that back at the headquarters and create some harmonized long-term strategy, how do you then reconcile that with the actual suppliers and the people providing the current body of goods and services, not threatening them so that you create a successful path? That, as you describe that, if I was on the other end of that and the supplier, I'd say, wait a minute, how do I fit into the long-term strategy of this company? Isn't that threatening to some, saying, as you're saying that, we're doing this A, but today we're going to be someplace very different?
Well, I think things are changing. So first of all, we have two approaches. One is about how do we make today better? So how do we look at the current business model, whether it be our own or our supplier's business model, and really help them to improve those things? A lot of those are incremental improvements, energy efficiency, waste minimization. But when you think about them done at scale, they have a potentially enormous impact. We calculated about 5 years ago that we probably had about $1 billion worth of waste in our footwear alone. Just waste that happens as a natural part of how you make the product, sell the product. So my CFO and you, I think, are really happy when I reduced that number, and everybody likes that number.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a whole kind of strategy around how do I help you just get better? And sustainability is just simply, in that case, another word for effectiveness, productivity, efficiency, lean thinking. It's all good business. And definitely there are trade-offs, but when you start to view it in that lens, it really helps change the conversation to a very productive one.
There aren't winners and losers through that evolutionary cycle, though. I'm trying to understand also the friction points. It can't all be.
There are absolutely friction points, and a lot of it is around mental model. And mental model, by that what I mean is I think that there is an old mental model which says that sustainability is a cost to business. And the mental model with the financial data and the evidence that we've given that we're really trying to get people to understand in our supply chain is actually no, sustainability is an investment in your business and the viability of your business going forward. And I can give you some examples. So I literally, with the team, we just came back from a 3-week trip around manufacturing in Asia, and I call it my Back to the Future trip. And it began in some of the factories which are really a bit more of the old school approach to manufacturing, and ended in some of the factories where together we're experimenting and doing innovation around how we radically redefine manufacturing and materials. So for example, we have a huge water footprint as an apparel industry in the dyeing of fabrics. And we went out to see the first set of machines that are actually doing dyeing of materials with zero water, 60% less energy, unbelievable quality in the product and the kind of quality of the product itself. And it's done now in a space that is maybe not even a third of this room, as opposed to a dye house, which would be 5 times or 10 times this room.
And where did the innovation for that come from? Is that coming from headquarters saying, let's try something different, or is that coming from the suppliers saying to you?
Well, it's a bit of both. So we have a team that's set up now to hunt innovation. I don't do philanthropy. I do strategic investments. It's great. I get to hang out with sharks. I call them sharks, and they're great. You'd want them to negotiate everything for you, including your house and your car and your carpet. And so they're out hunting new technology. And they're out hunting with a very clear purpose of it's got to make business sense and it's got to make sustainability sense. So they found a young startup in Holland that's been experimenting with this technology. We made a strategic partnership with them. We brought in some suppliers who thought, okay, well, we'll give it a go. IKEA jumped in and helped as well, and they're working with us. And like I said, the first machine is up, and we're opening it up to bring other suppliers in and other material dye houses in to say, we think this is the way of the future. So here's the great thing. The CEO of this major partner that's helping us we had lunch with him, and he'd just come back from China. I said, what did you have as a conversation with the Chinese government? What was the #1 priority? Climate, 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 energy. He said, and then I'm talking to the Vietnamese government about wanting to put a dye house in Vietnam because of the trade agreements will make that a really, really interesting venture. And the Vietnamese government is asking for environmental and water permits. And the only way I'm going to be able to build a dye house in Vietnam is if I use your waterless dyeing technology. So these changes are happening. You can start to feel, and innovation, I think, is going to be one of the key enablers. I think doing all this sustainability integration into our work is incredibly important, but we have to double down on innovation and fuel the world's pipeline of innovation on this work.
Super. Great. Thank you. Pat, different business, clearly, but you also made a significant commitment. Given the size of Wells Fargo, when we say significant, the numbers are going to be real big. I don't know your revenue size, employee size. You have 250,000 employees, right?
Yeah, 265,000.
265,000 employees. So this, and you're in charge of human resources. We all bless you for the work you do in that area. If any of us that have worked in human resources know what that means. So, but that is a very significant enterprise to actually decide this is going to be an important part of your business. So you've made, as I understand, a commitment of over $30 billion in financing arrangements. So talk about not just the money part of it, which are huge dollars to any of us, but what was the thinking that got you there and some of the twists and turns in the road of thinking? Yeah,
just thinking, just doing a comparison to what you're doing. So Wells Fargo is a very big commercial lender and commercial real estate lender. We have the biggest commercial real estate portfolio probably in the country, and we're touching a lot of companies. We're touching companies who are trying to make changes and in their operations and are trying to improve their facilities. So in addition to our own 100 million square feet of space and 265,000 people, we're touching American companies and international companies all over the place. And we have, with that touch point, we hope that we can find ways to not only improve our own operation, but facilitate the improvement in our customers' operations. So the $30 billion financing commitment is really about, the two main parts of that portfolio, and we've done about $12 billion of that $30 billion so far in the first 2 years, is really alternative energy and LEED green buildings, basically LEED certified and green building construction. So we finance energy projects like the Cascade Power Plant in the Southern California desert for SunEdison. We finance solar roofs for our commercial customers. We have grocery stores who want to put solar panels on their roofs. So we do that kind of financing that helps them become more efficient. And then in our own operation with our 265,000 people 10,000 locations, all this square feet. We're trying to find ways to improve what we do ourselves. So there's a lot. So I think that, you know, we're not manufacturing, we're not trying to find the technology, but we have so many touch points that we feel like we have a lot of room to help and to make improvements for ourselves and for our clients.
Can you talk a little bit about just the risk aspects of this financing? And the reason I'm going to actually do this for my own personal reflection is, as all of us who were institutional investors, anyone that had money actually in the recession, took a big beating, and for pension plans, severe beating. And coming out of that, you know, I kind of saw a fork in the road where one was, my God, we can't go through this again. This was so serious to what happened, especially in our real estate portfolios. So I think some investors left that recession, a lot of investors with more of a heads down approach. We got to play defense, we got to get back in the hole, we got to avoid any kind of, how would we get in these excessive leverage situations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then others have spent a lot of time thinking about risk and thinking there's a better way out of this hole, and that it's in part to play offense with more innovative strategies that have more long-term opportunity for investors. And to me, that's where sustainability is a good part of that path for us. So I think systems like CalPERS and ourselves have embraced this on our investment side because we think it works actually well in mitigating risk strategies for us. Now, here you are front and center in this recession also in a different way to us, you know, and I'm sure you had your own hand bringing in the corporation as well. But here you are coming out of that now saying, no, we're comfortable having $30 billion in financing. How did you get to that issue? I'm sure you got regulators and everyone just fascinated with banks these days.
Yes. Yes, we do.
Yeah, I probably touched on an emotion there, but
yeah.
So
risk is
get us in that.
One of those things that if you don't make improvements in your product line, in your manufacturing, you are at risk, and you know that, right?
Yeah.
So for us, there's two issues about risk and our lending portfolio, and not about our own operations, but our lending portfolio. First of all, when we make investments or make loans to people who are doing, you know, putting those solar roofs on or building those wind farms or the solar plants, we're working with people we know and customers we've done business with before. Sun Edison, San Diego Power, these are people that we've done business with. We understand the analysis they're doing. We understand the work that they're doing. We're not taking risks on totally new, you know, we're not an environmental venture fund. So we're not out there lending to or investing in something that's never been proven before. We're investing in things that we know that will help. But there's risk in not doing sustainability right as a corporation. And so the other side of risk management for us with our customers is trying to understand the risks of companies and the work that they do. I mean, we are a big energy lender.
Yep.
We lend to all sectors of the industrial complex out there. And one of the things that we require our lenders to do is to consider the environmental and social risks of the work that the people that we're investing in or lending to do. So you really have to understand, if you're lending to someone who is irresponsible from an environmental point of view, 10 years from now, they're not going to be paying you back because they're going to be in court somewhere, or they're going to be, running out of resources. We want long-term relationships with our clients the same way you want a long-term investment with us.
Right.
So risk management really is on both sides of that. The $30 billion, I actually think we're going to exceed that. Heard it here. But
right.
Those investments.
Tweet that out right now. Who's ever?
Don't tell the head of corporate banking. Those investments so far, find some wood here, have been very profitable.
Great.
We make money from this, and the same way a company who is, you're saving water, you're finding new ways, it's improving your bottom line over time. It's the same thing for us. These are good investments. These are things our customers want. And frankly, when we look at our own operation and our footprint improvements, we're saving energy, we're saving water, we're diverting waste for our own operation. All of that, even if you're not a convert on the climate side, you can appreciate being more efficient. And so I think that when you state your goal like that, it's something that the whole company can really buy into.
That's fascinating that you've given that much commitment already to that. But I guess I want to ask, because we're looking here, as we look at this scorecard and see companies that have not made much progress on some of these indicators, and so we want to understand, again, how do you jumpstart a business, or who are the thinkers in the business to get that going? Again, at Wells Fargo, you didn't all arrive at that in a big hug meeting, I'm sure, and saying, this is what we want to do.
Not a big hugging place,
well, yeah.
actually.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I used to work for an insurance company. We didn't hug either, but what I do remember often in my insurance days was often we had struggles, frankly, between finance, the actuarial, the underwriting, and the salespeople. Mm-hmm. All having different goals in the business.
Right.
We all wanted to make lots of money and make sure the stock price was good, but we all had different paths of getting there for that. Did you find, as you tried to get your business strategy down, where did the champions and the advocate come from in the organization to bring along the more conservative, risk-averse people? Can you give us a flavor?
It's kind of interesting because a lot of the champions, of course, came out of the social side of the company. We have a community development group, and we have people who are very focused on the communities.
Is that the stimulus for the thinking?
That's certainly that's our Director of Environmental Affairs, Mary Wenzel, works in our community development organization, and certainly she had joined the company in 2004 and has had a huge impact on this.
Well, you must be very successful, because often that is hard to get traction with the traditional financial people. She very quietly convinces
everyone to do what she wants them to do. So. But I would also say that our wholesale business people, the people who work with our commercial customers, real estate development, they understood that there was a market there.
Yeah.
And so while there was some negotiation involved, they have been very committed. We hired a team of experts in 2006. We started building an environmental finance team that could work across the businesses, giving advice about how you could do these kinds of things, what kind of deals were good, and what kinds of technologies you probably wanted to stay away from. So I think our wholesale lending staff was really quite visionary in terms of understanding what was coming, what was going to be important to their client base. They're in the offices of these companies hearing about their worries about the future. Yeah. So while everyone in the company didn't, and maybe still doesn't, completely agree philosophically, there has really been, we haven't got active resistors in management at all. Our CEO is on board, and we have a board corporate responsibility committee that's been quite supportive. So I think we feel very good about this.
Can you talk, because I'm sure you're with your peers in the industry often, can you talk about the larger role the finance industry will play in this discussion? Yeah. As you may have seen from our materials and our platform here at Ceres, we've announced the importance of this clean trillion, that we have a $36 trillion gap, and we need to get to the level of $1 trillion a year of investment, a goal which we think is possible, but we certainly need to have the finance industry as a key part of that. Can you get us to the larger discussion of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on what the other large financial institutions are doing, but I would say that I think all of the large financials are thinking about this. Many of them have made commitments and are doing similar. Maybe our cultures demand that we do things inside a little bit differently, but we're not by ourselves in understanding that this is an imperative for our communities, for our clients. And the financial industry in this country, as you all know, has a huge personal footprint. We have 265,000 people. If you add up the people who work for Citi and Bank of America and JP Morgan, we probably have another 600,000 people working and another couple 100 million square feet of space. So I think we all have a big footprint in this country, and I think that other financials are similarly thinking about this and making commitments.
Great.
Just one other thing that that we can do as part of this clean trillion. I mean, there's investing, there's thinking about our customers, there's our own footprint. We're also on the philanthropic side. Wells and the other banks too are big philanthropy organizations. We have big foundations. We give about $285 million a year. We've started to ramp, most of that's education and arts and human services. We've started to ramp up our environmental giving and spending some of those philanthropic dollars in investment in groups that are doing tangible things, either research. There's a group called Imagine H2O that's trying to find water solutions. We are a big supporter of grid alternatives that's out there putting solar roofs on low-income housing, for example. So that's another way that we can
I think your business card will be sought after
move.
because of that comment later tonight. Thank you very much. Hannah, just let's switch a little bit focus from the company side to the public policy side, if we could. And that's certainly been one of the disappointing parts of the larger conversation, is that we have not made better progress on convergence of policy around sustainability issues. Nike's been a key contributor to BICEP and the other coalitions around being such a strong advocate for that. Can you talk about that collaborative aspect of the business, and why do you do it? What do you get back for that? I mean, do you think that is part and parcel of your responsibilities at Nike to advance those coalitions, and what has that done for the conversation?
Well, you know, as you said earlier on, we're a for-profit business. It makes business sense. So if you think about the challenges that we all face to navigate continuing to have successful growth businesses into this next decade, all of us in this room are going to have to steward our businesses navigating volatility, navigating fragmented, diverse policies emerging from multiple different countries. You know, if you're a company like ours and you run an extensive global supply chain and distribution network, if the EU decides to pass a regulation on carbon, well, for us that becomes the global standard, because we just simply can't have multiple different fragmented approaches to policy with such a distributed supply chain. The other thing is, for us, when it comes to policy, you know, this is a system change issue. We need to somehow find a way to collectively change the system. And much of that can be done by disrupting the system and bringing in new innovations that completely make the old system obsolete, my preferred option. The second way of doing it is by working in collaboration with industry and other stakeholders, which we do extensively in the power industry. We have the Sustainable Power Coalition. We've been doing work with NASA to do open innovation work. And you know, many of us all work together to drive voluntary measures. But imagine you go out onto a soccer field if you're in America, and a football field if you're British. Imagine you go out onto a football field and you've got two teams competing with each other, and there's no referee, there are no lines, and nobody knows where the goals are. You don't have a game. And we really see that if you had the right policy in place, we could actually create a much more continuous, constant, less volatile framework into which we could be investing in that future that's actually going to help us move away from the scarcity, and the whole industry could go with it. So for us, policy is about good business. It's not a nice voluntary act or something we do because we feel we have a responsibility to do it. All of these things are about how do we shore up our business to be able to win in a decade in front of us, where we see huge issues around water scarcity, we see huge issues around air pollution and the impacts of climate change, volatility in supply chains, scarcity of access to materials. You know, we want to be a successful business. That means we need policymakers to support us, because ultimately these are jobs, just as you talked about. There's 1 million people working in supply chains, in Nike's supply chain alone.
Well, no one that runs for office doesn't say jobs 3 times right now.
Right, so should I say it again? Jobs, jobs, jobs. It's really all about jobs and growth.
That's the first thing that's on the business card always. So what's not connecting there when you are in these collaborative sessions with BICEP companies and others, and you're visiting with policymakers, and you are saying jobs, 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 and that's what is music to their ears. There's still what
is not moving them to that final part? Or how do you calibrate our success?
Well, maybe we can talk about...
Maybe I could ask just that. Are we getting better with the conversation? Is the change there or not?
Well, I think we still collectively have an opportunity, and I suppose this would be my call to action, which is I think BICIP has been pioneering in bringing together the voice of business in a much more coherent way. But when you walk in to a policymaker's office, a lot of the time they will still say to you, I just don't hear enough from business. And I think there is safety in numbers. I know what it's like to convince government affairs teams to let you, go out and take a point of view on climate. Absolutely, it's not intuitive necessarily. But when you look at the business case for advocating, and when you think about the potential collective power, even just in this room, if we were to be more coordinated and more cohesive as a group, and to go in as a single voice, how powerful that is. And I am firmly convinced that the more that business stands up and speaks out about how this is actually about us wanting to see our business protected, about growth in the future and about the green jobs in the future, that this is a massive opportunity. I mean, when I see those early stage startups and those new techs, the biggest fear I would have if I was a business in this room and I wasn't focused on innovation and public policy and integration is that you're going to get leapfrogged by some outside disruptor that's going to come in and disrupt your business completely, just like Nest just did with a few people. And that's going to happen to each one of us. So I would say get on the front foot, work together, and we all move as a go, all together.
All right, thank you. I like that. I'm going to do one more question with Pat and Hannah, and then we'll turn to you in the audience. Just, I think I'd like to go back to the engagement of the corporation itself, since we've talked about a lot of ideas, but none of these work, obviously, without the energy and engagements of your businesses. And again, to pull out two numbers from the roadmap, just to kind of give focus to us, this new assessment found that 32% of company board of directors formally oversee sustainability performance, up from 28%. Very minor change, 4 percentage points. On the employee engagement, the report found that 40% have programs in place, up from 30%. That's sizably different. So talk about where you fit on those two continuums: board leadership, employee engagement. Do you have certain incentive structures for employees? Are there certain board members that you brought on that made the difference, or can you do a top end and the bottom?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pat, do you want to start?
So our board, we have a corporate responsibility committee. We have a great board, by the way. I know yesterday there was a conversation about boards should have 30% women. Our board has 30% women. I thought I'd tell you that. And in fact, it's a really good board. We have a corporate responsibility committee. They oversee this area as well as other areas of our social responsibility, our philanthropic activities, our fair lending activities. There are a lot of things that require community engagement and social responsibility in a bank that they oversee. On the employee side, we have, with all these people, we have thousands of them who are absolutely passionate about the environmental work that they can do and that the company does. We have 70 groups that are called green teams around the country. And these groups, every year they have projects that they're going to get done, and this is voluntary activity for them. Some of the work they do is volunteering in the community, working with housing development, for example, with grid alternatives and stuff. Even I helped install a solar roof one time, learned a lot, wasn't very good at it. And then they do work inside the organization, waste diversion, for example, improving recycling programs, getting those motion sensors in rooms, small things that added up make a difference. We communicate to our people constantly, so we have websites and blogs and so forth, and our environmental stories on our website are some of the ones that people read the most, frankly, because they're interesting and they touch people day to day. So we have very good engagement from our team, and we have a good board of directors. So I think we've got the pieces in place. You have to keep it on the front page. Everybody's busy, so it's important to keep it on the front page. And with things like greenhouse gas emission reduction, which for us is very tied to energy use, those are goals in the for the executives most responsible, the head of technology,
Yep.
the head of
Huge.
properties,
Yep.
right? Those people have goals to help and support in meeting that part of our commitment. So it's on their list. It's important to them, along with everything else they have to do.
Super.
Very similar. We've had a CR committee of the board for a long time. I think we were one of the first ones to actually create that. And in fact, Harvard has just done a case study on it. So I suppose it's an advertorial. You can download it for free and out of your brochures on the QR thingamajiggy. So the CR committee, we have a very engaged CEO. And I share accountability for sustainability with other executives in the company. So whilst our team is a catalyst for the strategy, for a lot of thinking around the data, the analysis, the performance metrics, compliance and sustainability in manufacturing is actually the accountability of the COO. And definitely he takes that to heart and he's measured upon it. And he knows from me and from my boss and his boss when it's not going too well.
And you have full CFO, all the finance people?
We have
No one has to go back to remedial school on sustainability?
Oh, of course. Of course. It's a constant journey. But it's incredibly critical to bring people with you. Simon Zadek, who many of you know is great on this, once wrote a book about how you had to be a chameleon and learn to speak the different languages of the different people with whom you're engaging on this work. And I think that's true. And so we've become more sophisticated, I hope, in really being able to provide very robust financial data for the people that care about financial data, very robust evidence and metrics and facts for those that really need that. And then, there's always the inspiration piece of it. But I would say just on the note, for us, the leading indicator for us is how is sustainability being embedded into innovation and R&D pipelines. And we're lucky in that we've literally in the last 6 months, we've actually moved into the innovation function, and sustainability is a core to the entire innovation portfolio of the company. And that, if you start right at the beginning with innovation, I fundamentally believe that you can have this enormous magnifying impact down value chains into the next 3 to 5 years.
Very good. We'll turn to you now for our last, can we take 10 minutes, Stacey? Is that okay? 10 minutes? So we've got time for 10 minutes of questions, and there's a gentleman way against the wall. I'll do my best to see you, because I saw you, oh yeah. We'll get you a microphone, just 2 seconds.
Great.
You want to introduce yourself for everyone too?
Yeah, John Hansen, Paradigm Project. Terrific work, both of you, all of you. Hannah, quick question for you. I loved your dematerialization is really an exciting concept to me. So I was wondering if you could maybe expand a little bit further on that for our benefit in terms of how we shift in our paradigmatic shift on the conceptualization of what dematerialization is and how we can apply it for those of us who are offering either physical products, services, and your shift towards a service mentality as a product company. If you could just expand on that, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, so I would say that the dematerialization effort for us is, I'd like to be 3 to 5 years ahead. I'd like that to zoom forward, fast forward. It's about business model innovation. And that is always one of the hardest nuts to crack. So we have a number of different kind of work streams going on it and more coming in the future. But to put it quite simply, if you think about moving to services, the ecosystem of services around a fuel band is a good example of where we see some opportunity. I think also if you imagine a world in which you're closing the loop and where waste is the new gold and where we've actually managed to crack the code on incenting consumers to bring back their product because it can be rebirthed as new product, then you could ask the question, which is what would your business model be in that lens? Would design be a service? Would you think differently about that engagement with the consumer? I think there's a number of different areas when you think about a circular economy where dematerialization that can actually drive value creation becomes an intriguing and interesting proposition. So I think it's all there to play for. I think what it's going to take is us bringing together a kind of real hybrid group of entrepreneurs, innovators, technology, business model people, and really experimenting and prototyping on different approaches to how we do it. I think of the world as an enormous innovation pipeline, by the way. So for me, it's just like, how do you really start to fuel a pipeline on innovation that is focused on sustainability and circular economy, both at the product and the process, the technology, but then also the business model level. And I think services is going to be core to this.
Thank you. This gentleman right here on table 3 back from me, if we could. They're coming your way. Just hang in there.
Thank you. David Wofford with the Small Businesses Health in Supply Chains. Hannah, I was very interested in your point about working with policymakers and sort of collective action. And I wanted your response or your reaction to the thought that in supply chains, the same logic goes, which is you may want to compete over innovations on water and other things, but things like living wage, government services, all the things that are affecting things in Bangladesh really suggest not individual company action, but multiple company actions. And we don't see this in countries where all the apparel companies very often go and fight for better health services, for instance, in the community. And I'd like your reaction to that, because that is sort of a industry and corporate mind change, and how you deal with policymakers to level certain kinds of parts of the playing field.
Well, I'm going to, first of all, I'd say we have for a long time understood that there is pre-competitive and there is competitive. And that the old mindset of never shall we talk to Adidas or anybody else is long gone. And it was long gone because the apparel industry really went through a baptism of fire 20 years ago, 15 years ago, on all of these issues around supply chains. And one of the, I mean, there are many good benefits to what happened to the industry in that time, but just one of them is that it triggered an understanding that if we were to move these supply chains, we were going to have to collaborate. It led to the birth of the Fair Labor Association. Ultimately, today, it's also led to the birth of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, which brings together, I think, over 40% of the apparel industry to work together. And you know, Nike deliberately disclosed for the first time its locations in our factories back in 2006, so we could trigger more collaborative effort. So we're very clear as an industry, I would say, and as Nike, that we can't move the system on our own, and it's going to take all of us working together. So I think that is absolutely the way forward. I think all of us are going to have to learn this really interesting creative tension between being very surgical about when do we go together as a group and when do we compete. And interestingly, I think that actually some of the technology stuff on sustainability is now becoming competitive, which is, I think, a really good sign for sustainability. So I would just say, I think, actually for once in defense of the apparel industry, I actually think there's some really strong and good models around the way the industry is collaborating at both a national level and then at a global level in some of these big coalitions. Can we do better? Of course we can do better. And it's a muscle that we're all learning to build.
Pat, can I ask you that same question? Did you find the finance industry has that in this area, has that same incentive to collaborate around policy and sustainability, or is it still more independent, your approaches to this?
It's independent, but I would say that there are groups that have that report on the banking behavior in this area, groups that like Rainforest Action and you know, people like this who have been helpful in raising issues and putting things in front of the industry. So so while we don't work together necessarily that much, there's a lot of common understanding of the issues that we have out there and what people are doing.
I mean, just personal plea to you. I mean, I think a company like Wells Fargo, your voice can actually be one of the more important voices
in this collaborative
And
effort.
let's look at Mary. I'm betting that you actually do talk to the heads of environmental affairs at your level in the other companies, right? Yeah. So there is.
But I say that though because we expect Nike to be edgy, but you know the finance industry, you know, frankly, in some of the trade associations that have been so reluctant to be progressive in this area, these are the organizations often that involve the more traditional companies, right. And that's why again I just want to say your voice and others in your finance area are critical on moving that along.
It's a big impact.
Because,
I agree.
Yeah, they can be responsive to those voices. Others, yeah, I've got straight through there. Thank you. And I think then I'm done. Is that when I'm done? Okay, then I'm done. Totally done, or do we want to last question?
Tim Smith from Walden Asset Management.
Hey,
and Patricia, I wanted to ask, from a Wells Fargo point of view, you were talking about the very positive things you were doing with your lending and so on. Can you talk a little bit about the fact, since you have so many customers across the spectrum, as you said, where are you applying standards that would say, I'm going to step back and not make a loan, perhaps to mountaintop removal or a high-risk energy play that maybe because of the climate discussion we're having, you're saying, this might have looked good 5 years ago, and going forward, we think it's more questionable. Can you say a little bit about how you're using your environmental standards to influence your actual lending decisions?
Yes, that is a topic we spend a lot of time on. We have a group of people who specifically work with lenders in the high-risk industries. In mountaintop removal was the first one that we specifically stepped back from. So we don't finance any independent mountaintop removal. Now, occasionally one of our good customers ends up acquiring someone who has mountaintop removal. We don't then dump that relationship. We try to work with that customer on what their future plans are and risk management. And in the energy industry especially, we're really trying to do business with the best companies that are out there who are being responsible. We can't walk away from fossil fuels, right? We're using it every day. But we have to make sure that the companies that we're working with are thinking about the risks, are trying to understand. I mean, fracking takes a lot of water. So we have to work with the energy companies who are doing this on all the variety of risks, including availability of water and so forth. So it's part of the risk management analysis we do. We do walk away from companies. We do walk away from relationships, but we do not and won't walk away from the energy industry. Mountaintop removal is a special passion of mine. It's nauseating. And so that is one that we early on decided that we just couldn't deal with companies that were irresponsibly doing mining in that way.
Thanks for the question.
And I'm glad to meet you. We've talked on the phone.
Yeah.
Yes. I haven't seen you in person before.
Oh, he's got a big voice here.
I'm going to go say hello afterwards.
Well, I knew this hour would go fast, and hopefully this has been good for all of you. I want to thank the panel, Pat, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And,
thank you.
And